So I have a coin here, right? I'm gonna put the coin in my hand, pack it in there real good, get it down inside. Arrgh. Wait a minute, where'd it go? Oh my gosh, it disappeared. I don't see it anywhere. Maybe I should reach back in my hand, see if I can't. Oh, oh, there it is. Goodness gracious, Grandma. Wasn't that amazing? Well, anyway, that dumb little trick was an attempt to talk about sleight of hand or redirects, which is what magic tricks are. They're engineered exercises to get our attention off just enough so that we think we see something that isn't really there or some such thing. Um, that's kind of what's happening in the story. The next little section of the woman at the well with Jesus. It's kind of what she does. If if you look at it like that, it's kind of like she tries to redirect or to change the subject or to get out of the hot seat, so to speak. And Jesus handles it beautifully. So we want to look at that. And that is really the one thing from this message that I believe is what I want to share with you. You know how it is when you have a conversation with someone, especially if they're a strong personality. They want to take the conversation where they want to go. And if you are in a situation with you're sharing the gospel, you're sharing your story, you're sharing what God's done in your life or something like that, they might just be trying to take that conversation somewhere else. And it's good to be aware of that, especially if you have good manners. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings and they want to go some direction. You want to, follow that, so to speak, in the conversation. But you want to be mindful of what God is, why you're there. Because we're talking about opportunities that God has arranged for us to share our story. And I remember when I go into a hospital room at Harborview, I got to the point where I believed, and this might just be me, but I'm not sure. I believed that every time I went into a hospital room, that there was an opportunity for a perfect visit as a chaplain. Coming in, there's some kind of a situation. It's difficult. It's there's family there. There's a patient there. There's staff there. Um, and I always believed that there was an opportunity for a perfect visit. And my job was, as I came into the room, to read the family, to read the patient, the staff, everything, to read the room and to find, and by those signals then determine the right course and the right way to handle that. And if I did everything the way I was supposed to do it, I would find that perfect visit. Now that's a little bit, maybe mechanical or something. I don't know. That always helped me. But when it comes to sharing your faith, there's a need to stay on track. And a lot of that has to do with understanding who you're sharing your faith with. You might see a person that has a lot of bluster out front, but you're aware that inside they're hurting. And so you don't want to allow that bluster, that outward bluster, to take you away from the person that is in need, that's there before you. The story, the woman at the well, at this point in the story, I think she gets a little uncomfortable with Jesus and she tries to redirect the story, and Jesus brings it back beautifully. That's the thing. If we can be mindful of what we're about and why we're where we are at that time. And really pay attention to what's going on with the person. Really pay attention to what the Spirit is saying. Really listening to God. We can do what Jesus did, which is this amazing thing. So it's at the place in the story in John chapter 4 where Jesus says to the woman, call your husband. And she said, well, I don't have a husband. He said, you're right. You don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. And her next statement is, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet, which translation is, I understand that you are hearing from God, and you can see into my life, and God is revealing things to you. Now think about this woman. She's a woman that clearly has not had the best relationships. She's had unsuccessful marriages. She probably has had other relationships that weren't marriages but were also unsuccessful. She's probably somebody in the culture that receives a lot of scorn and criticism. Many have taught from this passage about her coming to the well in the middle of the day because nobody else is around, probably for that reason. And so she's somebody that doesn't really want somebody nosing around in her private affairs. And this revelation that Jesus has, at some level, probably put her on guard. And so he says this to her, and the woman says to him, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. And the next thing out of her mouth is an attempt to change the subject. She says, our fathers worship on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. This is like a 500, 600, 700-year-old controversy. I can't do the math that fast in my head, but you know, Solomon dies in maybe, I don't know, 900 BC or 880 BC or something like that. And the kingdom's divided. And when the kingdom's divided north and south, the northern kingdom sets up an alternative place of worship, because they're not going to go to Jerusalem. So let's call it 700 years before Christ. This is a 700-year-old controversy. The people up north, they worship at Mount Gerizim, and they think that's fine and dandy. But God's law requires to come to Jerusalem for 3 of the festivals a year. And if you're an overachiever, you'll come more often than that. But you're required to come to 3 of them. And so they're breaking the law of God by not coming. It's a huge controversy. It's part of the reason why the Jews had such a problem with the Samaritans. They were way out of relationship with God and rejecting God's law, and on and on and on. So this huge controversy, this huge religious controversy, Jesus dials in on her and reveals that he's reading her mail, and she brings this up. It'd be like if you were visiting with somebody and God's, you realize, you can read the signs that you're being led to share your testimony, your story, and it's time. But before that, God says, you get this feeling that God's saying. It's not like you've got an ear thing, like they do on the spy shows where you're listening. It's not like that. But you sense it in your spirit. And you become very convinced that God is saying that this person was wounded, emotionally wounded, offended, or something happened in the church years and years ago, and they left the church and never came back. And you say, wow, I get the feeling that you really believe in God, but something happened a long time ago and you've not been back to church for a long time. Is that true? And then the person says, you know what? I've been wondering, how do you feel about baptism? Does it have to be full immersion, or do you think sprinkling is okay? Or something like that. Some religious conversation that really doesn't have anything to do with what's going on. Just divert the conversation away. That's what the woman does. This mountain, that mountain. Jesus, he kind of answers it, and he actually adds this huge truth and this huge revelation. And it's like when he's talking with Nicodemus, which is in John chapter 3, right? Nicodemus, you have to be born again. Remember that story? And in the middle of that conversation, Jesus says that, the Spirit blows, you don't know which way it's going. It comes and it goes. The wind of the Spirit. It's like there's this huge dynamic and revelation in the middle of this conversation with Nicodemus. Jesus does the same thing with this woman. It's really big. Jesus says to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither worship on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." He addresses the fact that the northern place of worship is a violation of the principles of God, and it's not right. You worship what you don't know. You're outside the fence on that one. We know what we worship, because salvation is of the Jews. That's the truth. But then he goes on to say, but the hour is coming, and now is. That's the kingdom of God. The kingdom is here. The kingdom is at hand. The kingdom is near. You hear Jesus say this over and over again about the kingdom of God. The hour is coming, and now is. It's here now, but it's still being fulfilled, and it ultimately will be fulfilled completely and finally in the age to come. The hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Saying, don't worry about this mountain, don't worry about that mountain, don't worry about any of that stuff. It's about your heart. Let's come back around here and talk about your heart and your heart for God. And you want the truth. And you want to be in complete relationship with God. Spirit and truth. And he adds, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. And so the woman then, she kind of does it again, but she's also, what we're seeing is she's coming along, because now her thoughts are toward the Messiah. She's coming along. I know the Messiah is coming. He's standing right in front of her, or sitting right in front of her. Can you imagine? The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Then Jesus does something. He does this rarely. You hardly find this in any of the stories, any of the Gospels of Jesus. There's only a couple of places. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. He flat out says, I am the Messiah. She brings him all the way around from, let's have a drink. Give me a drink. Pour some water. Living water. Revelation that he's a prophet. God is spirit. Spirit and in truth. Messiah right in front of you. And she's at a point of decision. Disciples come back. There's a little bit of something that happens there. But then, verse 28, the woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and said to the men. That's a great, huge statement right there. Maybe she's saying to the men in the community she's familiar with, because, there is that. Or maybe she burst into the whether it was a synagogue or a pseudo synagogue or whatever it is, but she went to the location where the men were at and said to them, "Come see a man who told me all the things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" Then they went out of the city and they came to him. So this woman, she almost, to use a fishing metaphor, she almost wiggles off the hook, but Jesus won't allow that. He stays with her, he stays in there, and he stays on the truth. And she gets to a point where she forgets about her water pot. She just leaves it and takes off, just like the disciples leave their nets and follow Jesus. We have this change taking place. This radical change is taking place. And it's taking place because Jesus, the master evangelist, stayed the course with her. The story goes on that they come out. She keeps telling people about Jesus, and the men say to Jesus, "Why don't you stay a couple days?" He stays a couple days. Many people get saved. This is the beginning of the Samaritan Pentecost. And there is a breakout. Now think about that. How many times have you been talking with somebody and telling them about just the amazing thing that God is doing, and they get a little uncomfortable and they say, "Well, how are those Mariners doing?" Or, "Oh, the Seahawks got a big game." Or a political thing. That's always a zinger. Something to change, divert, cause us to get off. Don't fall for it. Because you might be talking with somebody who is the first person in a long line of a revival that's going to break out. You might be talking to somebody who's going to be the first person to get saved in their family tree, and their family tree will be changed clear on up till the time Jesus comes back. You could be talking with somebody that is in a position of authority, and because they get saved, decisions will be made that open up for the gospel to be shared in new ways. We don't know. What we know is that God will lead us. And when he leads us into that place, it's like that visit, that hospital visit. When we find ourselves, and here it is, and we become aware, it's like, maybe we're going to the store and we're walking with our head down thinking about something else, or what we're shopping for or something, and all of a sudden it happens in front of us and it opens up in front of us. We need to say, "Oh, Jesus, dial me in. Let me hear your voice. Let me see what I'm supposed to see and understand this setting the way I'm supposed to understand it. And help me to stay on track so that I can be used by you to be your witness." It's awesome. It's what God is doing every day around the world. He wants to do it with us. And there are people that are going to be saved because you took a chance and decided to share your story. So God bless you as you step out in faith. God bless you in your church. And I just encourage you to have conversations with your brothers and sisters in your church, your fellow Christians, maybe family member that are Christians, and get the excitement level up about sharing your story and reaching others for Jesus. God bless you. Bye-bye.